Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are strapping in for a journey into the world of an artist whose work didn't just push the boundaries of illustration. It pretty much redefined the laws of preparation itself. We're talking about Kim Jung-gi, or KJG,
Right.
an illustrator who turned static art into this high-octane, almost unbelievable theatrical spectacle.
And it's so much more than just a technical feat. When you really look at his work, you start to realize it's a cognitive one.
Right.
His live drawing sessions were less about, putting pen to paper and more about watching a mind. A mind running at overclocked speed, executing a fully formed vision.
Controlled chaos.
Yeah.
The perfect term for it.
It is. If you've ever seen one of his time-lapse videos, you know that feeling. You blink and suddenly there's a sprawling car crash or a massive battlefield, all rendered with what just feels like superhuman speed and precision.
And that speed, that instant fluency, that's really why we're here today. Our deep dive is focused on unpacking the sources that cover his radical methodology, his vast and highly synthesized artistic influences, and the really profound, lasting legacy he leaves behind.
Especially in digital and commercial art. It's everywhere now.
Exactly.
So our mission today is pretty specific. We need to really understand the psychological and technical feats behind his ability to create these scenes without preliminary sketches.
Without anything.
Without anything. It's not enough to just say he was a genius. We need to trace how this improvisational style didn't just make him famous, but fundamentally reshaped how we think about illustration, performance, and, even visual communication itself.
And to really appreciate the depth of this, we have to start with the one fact that just makes seasoned artists stop in their tracks.
The one that breaks everyone's brain.
It does.
Yeah.
KJG did not rely on reference photos.
Yeah.
He didn't use projectors. He didn't use compositional grids. He was accessing what can only be described as a massive, high-fidelity, internalized mental library.
And that's the key difference. I mean, most artists draw from memory, right? But that's usually a retrieval of generalized information, a car shape, a person shape.
Sure, the basic forms.
KJG seemed to draw from total recall, almost like accessing a photograph stored in his brain. The sources suggest it wasn't drawing from imagination in the traditional sense. It was more like watching a thought process externalize on paper in real time.
So he's pulling out precise angles, anatomical gestures, environmental details.
Instantly. From a database he built himself in his mind. And that fluency, that immediate access to high-fidelity information, that's the core mechanism we need to analyze today.
Okay, so let's start with the spectacle itself, because KJG really did define a whole new category of artistic expression that was, part concert, part magic show.
He really did. He fundamentally changed the definition of an illustration session. When we talk about defining live drawing as performance art, we have to contrast his approach with the traditional one.
Right, the old paradigm.
Exactly. That paradigm is all about meticulous premeditation. You're spending hours, maybe days, on layout, perspective, figure studies, all before the final execution even begins. It's slow, it's controlled.
KJG just completely inverted that. He threw the whole model out.
They did. His sessions were a torrent of continuous motion. We're talking about incredibly dynamic scenes, soldiers mid-stride, animals leaping.
The sources mentioned those highly detailed cars mid-collision.
Yes. All done on the fly with ink, which is maybe the least forgiving medium you could possibly choose. One wrong line and
You can't erase it. The whole composition is compromised.
And that fusion, the technical rigor of illustration with the dramatic tension of a live, unedited act, it led to this fascinating academic debate that's still going on.
How do we even classify this?
Exactly. Is it high art? I mean, the technical skill is off the charts, even if it often depicts pop culture. Is it just entertainment because of the theatricality in the audience? Or is it some new hybrid, a spectacle built on pure observational mastery?
That tension is what makes it so compelling, though, isn't it? But no matter how you classify it, there's a key principle at work here: dynamic composition under pressure.
That's the bedrock of it all. He had to balance foreground, midground, and background, control the visual flow, maintain perfect perspective instantly.
And often with that giant brush pen, which is a whole other level of difficulty.
It is. And this is the crucial takeaway for anyone in any field that requires high-pressure execution. It's proof that understanding spatial relationships and hierarchy has to move beyond the classroom. It has to be internalized so deeply that the execution becomes almost subconscious.
That instantaneous translation of a 3D space in his mind to a 2D line on paper.
That is the technical foundation of his genius.
Okay, so that brings us to the memory part. The genius of memory, what some critics call mental jujitsu for the eyes and hand. This is the cognitive piece of the puzzle that is it's staggering.
It is. It's not just that he didn't use references, it's how he trained his mind to make them obsolete.
So what do the sources say about his training? Because this wasn't just some innate talent he was born with.
Not at all. The lesser-known facts about his training are essential here. KJG reportedly engaged in rigorous, almost military-grade observation training.
So what does that even look like?
He would repeatedly observe real-life scenes, walking through a busy market, standing on a street corner, and then force himself to reproduce them purely from memory, without a second look.
Wait, so he would just walk down the street for an hour and then go home and draw everything he saw?
Pretty much. The sources describe these dedicated memory walks. He'd spend the first hour just on intense visual capture, not just looking, but studying the mechanics of the environment.
Like what specifically?
The horizon line, the specific angles of foreshortening on parked cars, the precise way shadows fall at that time of day, the shoulder and hip alignment of people as they walk past him. Tiny, specific details. And then, and this is key, the second phase wasn't just sketching. He would go indoors and immediately force the detailed recall of that entire complex scene without any correction. He was literally memorizing angles, proportions, the physics of the real world.
So he wasn't memorizing a person. He was memorizing that person with that specific slouch, carrying that specific bag.
Precisely. This technique is what allowed him to synthesize incredibly complex perspectives into fluid compositions instantly. He wasn't relying on a template. He was pulling from specific, high-resolution data points he'd stored away.
And this has sparked a pretty serious debate among art theorists.
Oh, absolutely. Some argue it's just an evolution of classical master studies. You know, the kind of thing Da Vinci and Michelangelo did, drawing a hand 1,000 times until the form is instinctive.
But others say it's something different.
Others contend it's a distinctly modern cognitive feat. They argue that while it's rooted in classical observation, KJG's technique leverages a unique mental capacity for visual retention that's optimized for the rapid, information-dense world we live in now.
It's the difference between memorizing a formula and memorizing every single application of that formula.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Okay, but I have to ask, what about failure? Did the sources ever mention a critical failure point? It just seems too flawless. Did he ever talk about the difficulty of maintaining that fidelity?
That's a great question, and the most skeptical critics do question the 100% no preparation claim. But KJG always stressed that the difficulty wasn't in drawing the individual elements.
It was in combining them.
Exactly, combining them convincingly, under pressure, in front of hundreds of people. His solution was constant training focused on structural integrity and line economy.
Okay, let's break that down. Line economy.
Despite the frantic speed and the spontaneity, his sketches never lose their structural integrity. They're always readable.
I've heard viewers say there is no wasted line.
And that's the crucial insight. Every single stroke has to serve a specific purpose. It has to contribute to depth or motion or form. Mastery isn't just about the lines you draw. It's about having the confidence to skip the unnecessary ones.
And that's where the speed comes from.
It is. By internalizing those spatial relationships, he eliminates the constant self-correction and erasing that plagues most of us. The line just becomes pure intention. This allows for extreme readability, even in his most incredibly dense compositions.
He uses confident contouring instead of getting bogged down in laborious shading.
Right, which is a hallmark of his efficiency. And this high-speed execution is then amplified by the context of the audience feedback loop. It was never just him alone in a room.
It was interactive art.
Totally. The sources document that the moment an audience showed up, the art shifted. It wasn't a static piece. KJG's live drawings fed directly off the spectator reaction.
The cheers, the gasps.
Even requests shouted from the crowd sometimes.
So how exactly did that manifest? Was it a visible change in his strokes, or did he actively solicit suggestions?
It was both. There are videos where you can see the energy in the room visibly influencing the pace of his pen. A sudden surge of applause might trigger him to add more intense detail to a central figure. A gasp might prompt him to execute a particularly daring perspective line.
So the audience wasn't just watching. They were part of the creative feedback loop.
They were, and that adds a layer of theatrical unpredictability that, critics argue elevates the whole thing to true performance art.
And we have to mention the theatrical setup itself, which has maximized the drama.
Oh, for sure. The quirky, almost physical detail of him working with a brush pen, a tool that demands total commitment, on these massive sheets of paper pinned to a vertical board.
The scale is so important to the performance, isn't it?
It's essential. He had to stretch and lean and make these broad, sweeping strokes across gigantic surfaces, while at the same time maintaining minute detail like the folds in fabric or the tread on a tire. The physical choreography of the drawing itself became a spectacle.
I remember reading that people joked he was part gymnast, part artist, and part wizard.
And it's earned. The ink dances, it flows, sometimes it even seems to splatter with intention, adding to the drama. You watch him execute this sprawling, daring line, and you think the whole thing is about to collapse.
But because of that internalized mastery, it never does.
Never. And this whole foundation is so critical because it reveals that his magic is rooted in deep, specific, almost obsessive observation and memory, not just some abstract, innate talent.
Okay, so now that we understand the performance and the method, the how, let's explore the what. What was he drawing from? Because his style didn't just appear out of nowhere.
Not at all. It's a living tapestry, really, woven from centuries of artistic traditions.
It's a masterclass in synthesis, not copying.
That's the perfect way to frame it. He absorbed influences like a massive sponge, but he never just replicated them. He wove them together into this coherent, seamless visual language that just feels instantly unique.
So the central design principle here is visual storytelling through layered influence.
Yes, exactly. He's synthesizing multiple, often historically disparate artistic languages into a unified visual sentence. You could find a figure whose stance echoes a 15th century master, but the line work and emotional intensity are straight out of contemporary Japanese manga.
And that's innovation rooted in thoughtful recombination.
Deeply.
So let's start with the Western and historical roots. It might seem surprising that an artist famous for such modern, dynamic work leans so heavily on classic European techniques.
But the sources make it clear that structure was his foundation. Take Impressionism, for example.
Impressionism? How so?
You can see echoes of it in his sensitivity to light and implied motion. He often uses subtle shifts in shading, selective hatching, and negative space to suggest form without relying on heavy, continuous outlines.
A bit like how Monet or Degas captured fleeting moments.
Exactly, but KJG applies that same sensitivity to a hyper-action scene with, robots and soldiers.
Then you have the influence of Expressionism, which feels a little more obvious.
For sure. His character designs clearly use exaggeration and emotional intensity. He'll stretch anatomy or gesture just beyond realism to convey pure energy or intent. That's the root of that visceral punch his work has.
But here's the one that I found really fascinating. His meticulous, historical illustration fascination.
This is such a great, lesser-known detail. The sources talk about how he just pored over 18th and 19th century European battle illustrations.
And why there, specifically? It seems so niche.
Not for the history, but to master composition, movement, and what he called narrative density.
Oh, okay, that makes perfect sense. He was studying how those artists, centuries ago, managed complex crowds and actions.
He wanted to understand how they made multiple characters and complex perspectives coexist in a single frame without it all just collapsing into visual chaos.
So he was deconstructing their compositional tricks.
Meticulously. He was memorizing the use of triangular forms to group soldiers, the technique of overlapping figures to create depth and scale, all these classical methods. And this study directly contributed to his ability to draw those signature, seemingly impossible perspectives.
And we can't forget the influence of classic American heroic proportions.
No, he was very open about that. He credited illustrators like Frank Frazetta and Hal Foster for shaping his understanding of heroic anatomy and that sense of kinetic energy in a pose.
But again, it's the synthesis that's the magic.
It's always a synthesis. He didn't just copy Frazetta's musculature. He seamlessly blended that Western heroic sensibility, which can be very grounded and heavy, with a distinctly East Asian calligraphic fluidity in his line work.
So his figures have both weight and grace.
The perfect hybrid, which leads us right into his Eastern and contemporary roots.
This is where it all accelerates into the modern era. So how did he integrate modern Eastern aesthetics without losing that classical structural integrity?
He internalized the entire manga and anime aesthetic by absorbing the logic behind it.
The logic, not just the style.
Exactly. The logic of sequential storytelling, the strategic use of motion lines, the exaggerated expressions for emotive design, the understanding of scene pacing. This knowledge is what lets him juggle multiple narratives within one single static frame.
And that's why looking at one of his big drawings feels less like looking at a picture and more like watching a whole movie unfold.
Yes, he effectively merged centuries of Western visual theory focused on light, anatomy, structure, with modern Eastern narrative techniques focused on flow, emotion, and speed.
And this fusion is what scholars are still debating, isn't it?
It is. Is this a whole new movement in illustration, or is it a highly impactful personal idiom that just reflects our globalized world? Either way, the ambition and the success of the fusion are just undeniable.
And the sources emphasize this was an active dialogue with the past. He was deconstructing and rebuilding.
Absolutely. Think of it as intellectual, high-level borrowing. He'd take the impressionist treatment of light and apply it to an exaggerated cinematic action scene. Or he'd borrow the stark, emotional gestures of German Expressionism, but then tweak them to align with the more naturalistic anatomy he learned from his Renaissance studies.
So it's not just referencing, it's sophisticated cross-referencing that goes way beyond mere homage.
Every stroke becomes this calculated conversation between East and West, memory and imagination, past and present.
And the result of all that is a visual vocabulary that is just.
Mm.
It's immediately and powerfully recognizable.
For sure. When you see a KJG drawing, you're witnessing this deep understanding of historical structure applied through a contemporary lens of spontaneous performance. It feels timeless because of the roots, and aggressively fresh because of the execution,
His genius was synthesizing that vast library of artistic knowledge.
proving that for a true master, the past isn't a cage, it's an infinite source of potential energy.
All right, moving into section 3. Let's get into the weeds of his technique. Let's define what makes a Kim Jung-gi drawing instantly recognizable, the specific stylistic hallmarks that go beyond just the speed.
I think it all starts with this incredible paradox of precision and freedom.
Explain that.
On one hand, you have hyper-realistic detail, and that comes from that internalized library we talked about. A flawless understanding of perspective, perfect anatomy even in twisted poses, the convincing three-dimensional drape of clothing.
Oh, the hard-won technical skill.
Right. But on the other hand, the lines themselves are purely fluid, spontaneous, improvised in front of an audience. It's this tightrope walk between precision and freedom that makes his work feel so extraordinarily alive.
It's a balance that has to come from years of disciplined, almost robotic practice.
It does, and that internal discipline gives him that technical hallmark of gestural line economy.
We mentioned this earlier, but it's fundamental.
It is. He's notoriously efficient. He relies on highly confident contouring, selective cross-hatching to define form, and strategically applied shadows. He's not getting bogged down in laborious shading.
So for any aspiring artist listening, the lesson is knowing which lines are absolutely essential.
Exactly. His technique dramatically speeds up production, but more importantly, it communicates energy directly to the viewer by leaving room for interpretation. It lets your eye complete the action.
Okay, and we have to talk about mental sketching. This feels central to his whole identity.
It is. KJG talked openly about visualizing entire scenes, massive, complex drawings with hundreds of characters before his pen ever touched the paper.
Sometimes with no preliminary pencil sketch at all, just straight to ink.
Straight to ink. It's often described as him playing a mental 3D video game. He's already plotted every character's motion, every building's perspective, every action sequence in his mind.
So his hand is just a high-speed printer.
Guiding the pen through an already rendered mental reality. The sources that dig into the cognitive mechanics suggest it was this rapid, sequential visualization. He wasn't seeing a static image. He was building a dynamic mental model and then essentially tracing that model onto the paper.
The physical act of drawing was confirmation, not discovery.
Yes. And the fact that he could maintain that level of consistency and complexity is staggering. That's the true measure of his genius for many.
That clarity of vision is so necessary when you look at how he handled color and tone in his monochromatic work.
Even when he's just using black ink on white paper, he achieves this incredible mood and depth.
How does he do that?
He's a master manipulator of tonal variation. He uses line thickness to suggest weight and proximity. Denser cross-hatching implies shadow and volume. And maybe most critically, he uses negative space intentionally to frame the positive forms.
So it's a really sophisticated understanding of visual perception.
It is. By carefully controlling the density of the lines, he's leveraging your brain to fill in the missing information and perceive texture and atmosphere. The scene feels richer and more three-dimensional than the literal ink on the page suggests.
Creating maximum impact with minimal resources.
The height of efficiency. And furthermore, his compositional mastery and narrative density are what elevate him beyond just being a technical wizard. They confirm him as a visual storyteller.
He doesn't just fill the page, he choreographs an experience.
Right. He frequently uses layered perspectives, overlapping action, and these strong, diagonally oriented compositions. It's all highly intentional. It guides your eye through a constructed journey, forcing you to pause at certain points before moving on.
It's very much like high-level cinematic storyboarding.
It is, and the narrative density is the key differentiator. He packs multiple interactions, subplots, dozens of objects into a single frame without it becoming overwhelming.
Which he achieves through that line economy and having precise focal points.
Every element supports the story. That distinguishes him as a true narrative artist, not just someone who draws well-rendered objects.
Finally, let's zoom in on the character and detail markers, the little quirks.
Yes, the things that provide texture and relatability in his crowded scenes.
What are some examples?
His characters are full of small, intentional markers, a specific twisted posture that suggests extreme tension, or a subtly bent wrist conveying psychological strain. Maybe an unusual accessory like a peculiar hat that hints at a character's personality.
And these aren't just random details.
No, academics argue these are his visual shorthand. They let him communicate complex personality traits instantly, which is vital when you have 80 characters on one page. It maximizes the emotional return on a minimal investment of line work.
So ultimately, his defining style is that perfect intersection of memory, observation, and controlled improvisation.
It is. It's a visual language that speaks to trained artists who get the technical complexity and to casual observers who are just captivated by the raw energy and narrative pull. It really has established a new benchmark for contemporary illustration.
And KJG's influence didn't stop at the paper's edge, did it? The sources confirm his work created this massive ripple effect across media and design. It fundamentally changed how people consume art.
And how workflows are structured. He permanently redefined creative boundaries in the digital age.
How so?
By turning the artist's process, the actual act of creation, into the main attraction. He blurred the lines between illustrator, performer, and storyteller.
Which opened up huge new avenues for exposure and income for artists.
And it changed how the industry operates. Galleries, comic conventions, corporate events. They all adapted this approach. They started prioritizing the spectacle of live creation. It proved the process of making something can be as valuable and marketable as the final product.
On a more technical level, he contributed the concept of instant visual narrative and rapid prototyping.
His ability to synthesize complex, coherent stories in real time without sacrificing quality became a massive inspiration for concept artists, game designers.
But how does that translate into digital projects, which are usually so structured and slow?
It inspired them to integrate spontaneity and agility into those structured projects. His workflow became a template for faster, more fluid visual communication in the early stages.
So, for instance, in a concept art pipeline,
A concept artist might be encouraged to skip rough sketches and move immediately to highly detailed but fluid black and white studies to establish mood and complexity much earlier in the process. It just increases the velocity of visual idea generation.
let's talk about his concrete influence on anime and animation, which the sources say is profound but often understated.
It comes down directly to advanced compositional strategy. His mastery of layered perspectives, combining foreground, midground, and background so cohesively, it allows animators to think way beyond the traditional flat plane of a cell.
Which leads to more immersive and dynamic scenes.
Incredibly immersive. And it's now a specific unit of study in leading animation schools across Asia and North America.
And there's that fascinating detail the sources mentioned about the secret studio reference.
Yes. Several high-profile animation and comic book studios reportedly used KJG's recorded live drawing performances as real-time visual reference.
So not for final inspiration, but as a practical tool.
A moving visual instruction manual for character motion and complex scene layout. It was a dynamic library of human movement and perspective they could draw from.
And what about the storyboarding hack? That connects back to his mental training, right?
It does. Some studios have adopted a workflow change where they encourage storyboard artists to mimic his mental sketching method for early passes.
So they force themselves to visualize the entire sequence in memory first.
Right, the key 3 or 4 frames.
Yep.
And by doing that, they produce sequences with inherently more fluid, natural movement. And the critical result is they significantly reduce the need for excessive digital correction and cleanup later in the pipeline.
Which saves time and money.
A lot of time and money. And his impact also extends way into commercial design and education. His visual vocabulary is everywhere now.
His dynamic poses, the gestural anatomy.
It's constantly borrowed by illustrators for commercial projects. If you look at high-end sneaker collabs, collectible toy packaging, promotional graphics for games, you see his influence on the visual appeal.
And pedagogically, he introduced a strong new model.
His workshops focused on mental visualization and making execution instinctual, not just technically correct. This resonates strongly with modern cognitive psychology approaches to skill learning, which prioritize deep, deliberate practice aimed at automating complex movements.
So some academics see his method as a blueprint for a new pedagogical model in the visual arts.
They do. We also see his principles directly influencing interactive media. This is a crucial area.
Like mobile gaming and VR.
Absolutely. Designers for mobile gaming interfaces, VR environments, AR experiences, they borrow his principles of narrative layering and depth management. They're trying to emulate the crowded, action-packed vitality he achieved.
Which leads to this crucial discussion of cultural cross-pollination and transparency. He wasn't working in a vacuum.
Not at all. He provided a practical blueprint for artists to synthesize global aesthetics, showing how to move past rigid, nationally defined stylistic schools. His marriage of Western anatomical structure with Eastern narrative flow enriched the global artistic dialogue profoundly.
And his transparency was revolutionary for the modern creator, wasn't it?
Completely. His live sessions, streamed and recorded stroke by stroke, directly influenced how contemporary artists share work online. He normalized real-time, process-oriented sharing, fostering a culture of instant engagement and feedback that we just take for granted now on Instagram and TikTok.
So at the end of the day, KJG's work led to a profound shift in audience expectations.
It really did. People who see his work now expect dynamic, immersive, and participatory storytelling over passive observation, and that shift impacts everything from art exhibitions to modern advertising, underscoring that his legacy isn't just about the art he created.
But the way he invited the world into the vulnerable, exhilarating, and highly technical act of creating it.
So let's bring this truly deep dive all back together. The legacy of Kim Jung-gi really rests on 3 powerful, interconnected pillars.
First, he redefined illustration. He elevated the process itself into a live, interactive, and highly marketable performance art.
Second, he demonstrated a masterful synthesis, weaving together global art history from 18th century battle illustrations and Impressionism to modern manga and American heroic anatomy into a single, instantly recognizable, coherent visual language.
And third, his profound technical influence reshaped contemporary design and animation workflows, inspiring a culture of spontaneity, rapid prototyping, and agile visualization across digital media globally.
And that academic classification debate, was he fine art, illustration, performance art, it's still unresolved.
But maybe the lack of a simple classification is the ultimate testament to his originality.
I think so. He built something entirely new by systematically internalizing the world's visual history and then drawing the entire world from pure instantaneous memory.
And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. If Kim Jung-gi's superhuman ability stems directly from his disciplined practice of memorizing the entire world around him, every street corner, every mechanical detail, every precise gesture, and transforming that rigorous observation into instinctual, spontaneous skill,
then what specific high-fidelity mental library are you building right now in your own field, and how might you transform your own passive observation into active, spontaneous mastery?
something to think about until our next deep dive.